What's up, Coach? Welcome back to a brand new episode. I've got my friend here, Coach Phil, back for a new one, looking sharp.
Mhm.
Um, Phil, first of all, thanks again for jumping on. How have you been? How's coaching been? And how's life? Tell us.
Yeah, really good. I think by the time everyone sees this, it's a few weeks in advance. So hopefully by that point, I'm working full time now as a lecturer in sport. So
Nice.
yeah, things are exciting. Things are going good, and had to dress up a little bit today with some interviews and meetings and stuff going on. But here we are. Time to talk about futsal today.
Yes, excellent. So today's topic for those watching or listening is going to be touching on futsal, right? This is something that a lot of coaches introduce into their business. I know from experience, a lot of coaches that are in colder parts of the world, um, the winter is very difficult to do sessions outside. So futsal could be an alternative to continue training throughout the winter. Um, I know from experience a lot of teams do this, and now coaches in the private training industry have started to implement it as well. So Phil is going to talk about how to run a session. Also, he's got a lot of experience in running futsal programs. So, Phil, first question for you: when it comes to futsal, why, aside from a business perspective, it allows you to run sessions throughout the winter, but what are the benefits for players and for clients introducing futsal into your program?
Yeah, it's really big. So I did a couple of years ago. I did both my level one in coaching futsal and then the level two. It only
Nice.
goes up to the UEFA in futsal. Um, And it is really good. So back in the day, probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, so all academies in England actually had futsal as part of the curriculum.
Hmm.
And Arsenal were one of the only ones that kept it going sort of when it disappeared in a way. The
Yeah.
FA are sort of trying to revive it, at least in England, but it's still not at the level that it can be. Um, but this, all the benefits you get out of it, you get all the technical stuff. So your passing and receiving skills, your scanning, your decision making, you're constantly on the move. Like the ball will go out and then it's back into play really quickly.
Yeah.
And you have like a few seconds to get the ball back into play because there's no time wasted in the game at all. The time it gets stopped as well, every time the sort of ball is out of play and stuff like this. So it's really, really fast paced. So your players' decision making goes through the roof. Their intensity and speed of thought has to be high.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're playing in a much smaller space, in a smaller format than the 11v11 game. So all your technical stuff, how quickly you can evade certain areas. But there's also the tactical side of the game. So your sort of positioning and combining with your teammates, all of this sort of stuff is really in it. So it's a fantastic sport. And if we can get as many players into it, that would be amazing because it really truly does give a lot of benefits.
Excellent. Some parts of the world, futsal is massive,
Mm,
um,
yeah,
and they really push players, especially at the younger ages, to play it, and
yeah.
then it helps them when they go into 9v9 or 11v11. So let's take, if I'm a coach, and I've got a business that I'm running outside well, throughout the spring and summer, and then I get hit with winter. What are a few things that I need? This is more of
hmm
like a business perspective. What are things I need in order to run a futsal program in the winter?
I think firstly find a sports hall. So a lot of schools, probably secondary schools, will have sort of sports halls. And then obviously speak if you can hire them out. And depending where you are in the world, like you say, some countries are big on futsal, so their sports halls in schools already have pre-made futsal goals, and they implement that as part of their PE curriculum, so you don't have to worry about that. In England, for example, very rarely are you going to get futsal goals in sports halls unless they're specifically made for futsal, which isn't many.
Yeah.
But what you do get in a lot of some schools is you get handball goals. And
Hmm.
they are very, very similar in terms of size, so you can always use them. And you get that a lot because handball is part of the PE curriculum in England. So you do have the sort of the dimensions are roughly there. So make sure you have obviously the facility. And then in terms of equipment, it's very similar to the football equipment. So your cones, your bibs, anything else that you use in your sessions. The futsals that are slightly different than the actual footballs. So they're a size smaller, and also the density of the ball is different. You can't really play in the air as much with it.
Mm,
But you can. I've done futsal sessions indoors with footballs before.
mm,
Um, you can if you don't have futsals available. If you want to make your program, a little bit more futsal specific, you can order, futsal balls and then use them. And that's pretty much all you need, to be fair.
mm.
Just as long as you have a facility, you have your own football equipment that works anyway, and then just the addition of futsals, and that's pretty much it.
Excellent. So from your experience, how would you run a great futsal session?
Yeah, so we have a little example on the screen. So this is sort of 3v3 attacking. And I just want to point out, because if you look at the amount of players that are in this, there's 14 players already in this session and they're all involved.
Mm,
Okay, so you've got the yellows against the blues on one side playing 3v3, and the blues against the yellows on the other side playing 3v3.
mhm,
So instantly you've got all 14 players involved. Now, if you're running this as you have smaller groups, you don't quite have 14 players. Absolutely, you can. You can do this with 6 or 8 players.
mhm,
You can do two against two on one side and two against two on the other, or you can do 1v1s, whatever it might be, depending on your group number and how big you're sort of scaling this.
mm,
Um, but futsal allows you the opportunity because it's in a controlled space in an indoor hall. The weather isn't a problem. You can really scale it up and you can have really increase your business in terms of also size, in terms of the players that you have. You can really have a lot and they're all engaged, they're all working. So good arrival activity in futsal. A little bit different to football. You don't really need the sort of traditional warm up that you do in football because a lot of it is just game based. The risk of injury is a little bit lower than in football. So this is a really good arrival game. You get them into two teams, and you play a 3 against 3 on one half of the pitch, 3 against 3 on the other half of the pitch, and it's actually a little arrival small-sided game. You play that for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending.
mhm,
Then move into the second practice that you see on screen. So this is a little bit of passing and finishing. Okay, so essentially the blue team have two footballs with them. Okay, the yellow team are on the outside. Now, if you don't have all of those players, you can use cones or mannequins or whatever to represent the sort of the other team. And it's essentially just a little passing and combination game. So the
mhm,
Blues, you can put this, the Blues are trying to make 3 or 4 passes to combine and score on either side of the pitch. So that's why you have three on one half of the pitch and then three on the other half of the pitch. And they're just trying to combine to score. So you're putting in the futsal principles in immediately of combination play. A lot of futsal teams will play a 1-3-3 system. So goalkeeper, back three, and a front three.
mhm,
That's how most futsal teams play. Some will play slightly different, but that's how they play. And then, yeah, so these are two examples on here on this page of how you can do it like that. If I just go backwards off this and show you.
mhm.
So there's loads more. And this is on the England Football Learning website. So that's the 3v3 that I showed you.
Yeah,
We've got a marking session, 2v2s,
nice.
moving with the ball, so 1v1. So again, this links if you're doing, really small group sessions, not a problem. You can do 2v2s, you can do 1 against 1. You might just have two, three, 4 players. You can do small groups in futsal.
Mhm,
Different finishing sessions. Again, we've got 2v2 here again. There's a couple more. Passing session, attacking and countering, and intercepting sessions. And these are all free to sort of access if we go on the little 2v2 session here.
mhm.
Gives you a little bit of detail and then obviously the session plan. So again, this is for smaller numbers now.
Yeah.
So if you're operating a business with smaller numbers, this is the sort of session planning that you can do. And then if you keep scrolling, gives you a whole session plan. So similar to what we did in our last video when we touched on AI and different softwares for your
Mhm.
session planning. Doesn't have to be AI. There's, human-made session plans as well, such as
Yeah.
this one by the FA. And it gives you all the sort of relevant information, progressions as well for your session plans,
Mhm.
how to use the step framework, yeah, and stuff like that. So it's quite a good tool, regardless of the sort of group sizes that you're working with, which is good.
Nice. So if you're a coach and this is something you want to do in the winter months especially, how give us an example of maybe two or three things that will help you to sell this to parents. So how can you
Mm.
sell it to parents that shows parents, right, it's something valuable and it's something that's going to help them both when we get back outside and on their team.
Yeah, I think really detail the sort of the technical aspects that the players are going to improve on. So
Hmm.
really promote all of that, those side of the game. Um, Obviously, depending on the country you're in, the weather side of it. So the
Yeah.
players are still playing football, but in a slightly different format,
Mm.
and they're not affected by the weather. Because the alternate to that is the way you sell it. Well, we're either canceling a lot of sessions or we're regularly doing sessions, delivering sessions. So, and
Mm,
I think those two ways are really good to sell it.
mm,
The third thing that I'd say is have a look at some of the best footballers in the world currently. And
yeah.
I promise you, a lot of them have a futsal background,
Hmm.
especially in sort of South American countries. Pretty much
Hmm.
all of them do.
Yeah.
But even in England, like I said, a lot of Premier League clubs were doing this before futsal sort of went out of favour. Actually, the FA stopped running futsal in England for a period of time. They only recently got the rights back to being in charge of futsal. It was run separately by a different organisation, and now the FA have futsal back in the last sort of 5 to 7 years ish.
Hmm.
Um, that's how I'd sell it to parents. You should really make them know the technical stuff. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Give them examples of the players that have a futsal background, because obviously the parents want their players to become the best.
Yeah. And
And then the simple thing is the weather. Well, either we're cancelling a lot of sessions or we're delivering a lot of sessions. It's a no-brainer, really, I think.
excellent. So what would you say is a good duration for a futsal program in the winter? Is it 6, 12 weeks? How would you structure it if you were a coach running a futsal business?
Yeah, I think I'd probably start it in November. I think September, October, you can maybe get away with the weather, depending obviously where you are. And then in November, I'd probably do a 6 week block, and that takes you up to the sort of Christmas break anyway.
Yeah.
So you've got that 6 week block, 4 weeks in November, 2 weeks in December. Then when you return in January, I'd probably still do an 8 week block, and that's the whole of Jan and Feb.
Hmm.
And then from March, April, you can probably get away with being outside more. So in total, that looks like a what, 14-week futsal program,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah.
It depends where you are. In your you might be able to only have to do it for 10 weeks, 12 weeks.
Yeah.
But so it depends where you are in the world as well in terms of that. But I think something like that is good because I think from sort of March to October, you can get away with the weather. Anything
Hmm.
sort of from November through to Feb probably is the block where you're introducing futsal more.
Okay. Good. Good. Now, I know from experience in the US, for example, and we work with coaches and coach a lot of coaches watch our channel. Um, their teams tend to do playing football, futsal leagues throughout the winter. So their
Hmm.
matches maybe once a week. Um, and that would be also a good alternative if you have a business of players of a similar age group. You can put a team together to play in a futsal league um, for, I don't know, it could be 6, 8 weeks. If you don't want to go down the session route. Because some coaches might be watching and go, yeah, but hiring out a facility might cost a lot of money to
Hmm.
run sessions. The alternative could be maybe playing in a futsal league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a really good option as well. Again, it depends where you are in the world. Like you mentioned, in America, maybe as big. I think in England, there's not that many futsal leagues, especially not any specific winter leagues, unfortunately,
Mm,
which is a shame. And I think it's something we can definitely invest in. You look at so many games that are called off in the UK. As across, the whole of the UK, not just England.
yeah.
How can you fix that? Well, why can't we have a futsal program in the winter?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, if that's something that exists in your area and the costs of it are cheaper, and you have enough players in your program for it,
Mhm.
absolutely enter a futsal league. It's only going to help develop your players, I think.
Excellent. So, in terms of, so if you are a coach, you're running futsal sessions, what's other things that you can incorporate to add value to players and mix it up a little bit? So it's not just futsal, but what else can you do in your
Yeah,
sessions?
that's what I said earlier. Well, you can do like football style sessions just indoors.
Hmm.
So you can still work the football aspect of the game. The only thing that changes is you're not freezing cold, the wind's not blowing, and you're not getting rain on your head. You know what I mean? So you can still absolutely run specific football style sessions. You can do one-to-one sessions, whatever you're doing, small group sessions. And it doesn't have to deteriorate too much from your plan.
Yeah.
If you enter a futsal league, then maybe you do a little bit futsal specific stuff so that you can prep your team for the league. But if you're just using it as a facility to avoid the winter months and you want to sell the product of better technical development, you can still do your sort of normal football sessions. I think all the sessions that we showed in one of our previous videos, they would still apply to this.
Yeah.
Your ball mastery, you can do that in a sports hall. Your
Yeah.
passing and receiving, you can do that in a sports hall.
Hmm.
Your finishing, like I said, some sports halls will have goals, others won't, but you can always improvise and use cones. The ball bounce off a wall anyway.
Yeah.
Um, So it relates, it relates really easily, and I think you don't have to. It's, it's not like we're asking the coach to learn a whole different thing or to change their program completely. Most of it stays the same. You're just avoiding the cold weather.
Mm-hmm. 100%. You can also incorporate some fitness aspects
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
you can do physical sessions in the hall inside as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you said, it's kind of like just transitioning from what you're doing outside, moving it indoors. So in your experience, what's and this might put you on the spot a little bit, but what's the biggest mistakes you see with coaches when it comes to futsal? Or is there anything that you see?
The first thing, we don't really acknowledge it as much as we should.
Yeah.
I think that's the first thing. Like everything's either football, 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 or futsal. There's
Mhm.
not, but why can't we link the two together? I would say that's the first sort of big mistake that I see from coaches. They're not willing to give futsal a chance. Um, and then from sort of from the inside, when you're inside, I think it's just, and it comes down to us as coaches and something that we all know we need to be aware of as coaches, just being adaptable. Like how flexible are coaches with their session planning?
Yeah.
How adaptable are you to deliver more futsal style sessions indoors? How confident are you to sell it to the parents? Those three things I would look at and say mainly. Maybe it's not even mistakes, but just a lack of education on futsal. I don't think is as much as we get on football.
Hmm.
The sport globally isn't as big as football.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe it's just a case of we need to promote it more. We need to educate people about it more. Um, because it does really help your players.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, so one last question, and this is one that I actually got from a coach. It was last week, right? So I wanted to share it with you today and see what you thought and what's some like techniques you can use. So the coach reached out to me and he said, Leo, how do you coach shy players? Right?
Mm.
Shy players, it might be players that show up for the first time to your session, or it might be players in a group that are scared to call for the ball. So how can you coach those type of players to get
hmm
them outside of that sort of comfort zone of being shy? And this could, it's relatable to both outside and in a futsal setting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think firstly is be approachable as a coach. So as soon as that new player comes in, welcome them,
Mm,
explain to them what they're doing. They might need an extra explanation because it's their first time there.
yeah,
If you can have one of the players that's been with you for a while, so sort of the leader of that group or the team captain, whatever it might be, and sort of give him a role to initiate and introduce the new players into it. I think the kids will always sort of learn better when it's someone their age and their stage that's sort of giving them that introduction and making them feel welcome.
yeah.
Because from an adult, that's expected of us. But if you have that environment with also the players within themselves, that's always better as well.
Hmm.
And then it's just, positive feedback, praising them and building that confidence into them. Don't expect that they're going to be able to do everything. Like you said, if it's their first time playing football or futsal, whatever it might be,
Hmm.
expect that level of ability might be slightly lower and then support them through their development. And then I think slowly you build that rapport over time and you'll end up having a much more confident player than they were in their first session.
That's good. So, do you think as well with those type of players, it depends on the environment they're in? So, if they're in a bigger
Mm.
group, it's a lot harder for them. Whereas it maybe putting them in a smaller group, maybe 4 to 6 players, they
hmm
get more out of it.
Possibly, or you can also flip it the other way though. If someone's really shy and doesn't like talking, if there's loads of people in the group and they're playing a big match, he doesn't really have to talk as much. So
Yeah.
he might feel more confident. But if he's in a small group of only 4 people,
Hmm.
probably feels maybe even more shy because he now has to engage because it's a smaller group. You can't really just sort of hide in a way that like you can in a game when there's
Yeah.
10 players, for example. So you just have to get to know who you're working with, and then you can decide off that. Everyone's different. Um, and then you just find the right. If you see that they're not doing too well in a big group, you can always move them. If you see that they're struggling in a smaller group, you can move them to a slightly larger. So you just have to be adaptable, like we said earlier, and really get to know your players, and then you can find what works for them.
Fantastic. All right, perfect. All right, Phil. anything else you'd like to add just before we wrap up today's episode?
Hmm. I think just closing thoughts is, especially in the winter months for coaches, try and implement futsal into your program. It's only going to make your program better. It's only going to make your program stand out from the others that don't have it.
Mhm.
You're selling an extra product to the parents as well, so it looks better from a business perspective for you as well.
Yeah,
And then from a coaching perspective, you're making sure sessions aren't getting cancelled, the weather doesn't affect it. Um, so yeah, just hopefully everyone got a little bit of insight into futsal a little bit more that maybe they didn't have, and hopefully we can see it more often in football.
100%. And so if you are watching or listening, you've got any questions, visit description below this video. That's the best place you can connect with us. And we can help you either to implement a futsal program or get any questions that you may have answered by myself or by Phil as well. Okay, so Phil, thanks again for jumping on. Always great to have you, always great knowledge, and I'll look forward to our next episode together.
See you guys in the next one.